So here to talk through some basic strategies for spiral galaxies puzzles. We'll use Serkan's two examples, both a classic and a doubled variation, to get through these tips. The first thing in classic spiral galaxies that I find I do is really just mark some of the known edges I have in galaxies, and once I've marked known edges, mark the rotationally symmetric spots for those. So for instance, in this space, marking this rightmost edge now really highlights a cell which doesn't have a lot of options. It can't come up and over, it's got to come down. And just putting that in the grid really starts to break into the space. You can get things like this cell gets identified by marking this edge just above it. It really has no options to the left. All of these are going to run into other galaxies, so you can get early points of progress like this just by marking things you know. Isolate this one cell, which helps over here. Get these out. The next thing you'll do all the time in spiral galaxies is think of continuing a connected path, and are you going to run into a situation where you cause a collision? In this case, if this came up, it causes a collision, so we get two circles into one group. And every time you can spot such a situation, you can really make headway in the grid by isolating a very specific path. So once we mark this off, and once we see from the starting state that these edges close this off, we get a cell down here which can't come up, has to come over. If it came over even more, it would cause a collision, so it doesn't come over more. It has to come up. That actually now isolates the single cell and forms this U shape, which will continue at least up to here. If this came over here, it would collide with that cell right there. So it has to come up at least one more. Now if this comes up here, it's going to collide with this cell. And if this extends over to this part of these galaxies or anything here, this will take it off the grid. We're at the point where there's only one galaxy really that it can connect to, which is this circle. Put that in. That will complete the first of the theme parts of this solution, which is this letter S. Get some easy cells here, which really just have one option. We'll close off this shape. And I think we'll come back to looking at this lower part of the grid. And here again, now that I have a cell which has two of its borders specified, even this cell, but this cell in particular looks pretty challenging to complete. Where we'll begin is to think it's not connecting here because of the edge is already there. It's not connecting to this cell. It can't connect to this cell because the edge there. It's not connecting here because this would map to another space. This takes it off the grid. These take it off the grid or cause collisions. It has just one option, which is the one that feels intuitive to connect to. And you could have even at the start when we marked off these two lines seen that this really had an option which looked sort of hard to fit in the grid, but it's technically possible. Or it had an easier option which tucks away to the side. In spiral galaxies, the intuition of tucking away often works. It's not a 100% solution. Intuition is never a 100% solution. Logic is the way to be sure of those things, but when you get elements that will work together and be clean, you can sort of get those deductions more naturally in the grid. After I mark this boundary, my eyes come to a cell like this. The reason is it certainly can't map to the nearest galaxy. That causes a collision with the cell. And it also can't come further out to the left. This is taking it further out on side 2. This is part of a very large galaxy. It has to connect to something. The only option I see for it is this cell here. And what I'll do in a circumstance like this is just notate with letters or a shape or something that's distinctive that these come together. I actually don't know any more cells right now for this shape because it could come to the left and up or come up and left in this way, and that would leave unused very different cells. But this gets me going to at least recognize that there's a large shape and it's gonna somehow connect these points. This cell on this other upper, this right edge side is also limited. It can't connect up and above, so it has to come down. But now that we've marked this galaxy in, it's going to use this cell or that cell. It really can't connect here. It can't connect further to the left because that's going to isolate these cells from each other. So this also has to become part of this large A galaxy. And once we start to see it forming together, we can put in the information we have from these paired cells and see that it at least is going to take this space. The last kind of deduction you'll want to do, and this is very important in the vicinity of a large galaxy, is look at gap cells. So these two cells are part of something other than the A galaxy, which means these cells that are rotationally symmetric are part of something other than the A galaxy. Similarly, these and these have to be accounted for. And so these right now are, where I'm placing these circles, are white cells that aren't part of A. They can't come, this one for example, can't come further out for various reasons. It doesn't have a center of a galaxy that could work. It can come right here. And so recognizing this cell is important to explain. We see how to fill it. That blocks off the center spot, and that actually now completes the shape that the galaxy has to take because we've cut off one of the two options by marking off this cell. And we get the remaining one as what goes in the grid. Now we have a circumstance cell like this, can't come here, can't come here. Forms that. The cell has to come up and left, so we get another good shape there. So that finishes this grid. As you'll see, it wasn't required of these puzzles to have a visual theme, but a few of the puzzles this week have them hidden. This one has this S-O-O-N, or soon, in the grid from these symmetrically placed letter shapes. The main thing I wanted to show in solving the style is the importance of marking off starting edges, finding isolated cells that connect to larger groups, ultimately even mapping sometimes letters, not specific paths that sets of cells take, and then using things like gap assessment to say, you know, if these aren't part of A, these aren't part of A, so how do I fill a cell that's somewhat challenging? So that step of finding the hard cells to reach is one of the more common and powerful steps if you get good at it for spiral galaxies. And the doubled form of the puzzle will emphasize some of those same elements even more strongly. We have to be cautious at the start to not do too many edge marks because these gray cells actually have a little more flexibility than typically, so we can't, for instance, mark this edge because this could connect over with another group. But the rules around white cells are still true and we can use them. The more immediate step that you'll often take in a double spiral galaxies is to just start to try to map galaxies with each other. So let's take an example of this point. You will often be thinking about the center of symmetry for such a galaxy. If this map to here, the center of symmetry is on this edge. Right now that's part of a galaxy. So the exact center is not going to be used by A, but that means you have to get around it, and so this isn't possible. If A mapped to that one, we'd isolate however it forms this cell. This is going to be trickier to come up to. It's going to isolate the other cells, and coming all the way to the top, the center here doesn't make sense. So this is the one that feels natural, but you may say, well, look, its center of symmetry is where another galaxy shape is, and that's possible, but it actually then requires you form a full ring around this group. And so to form a ring, we'll need to take for instance, at least these cells, there's not a large channel, so it actually is forced to take everything I've now put in, and that just leaves this for the center for now. We'll come back to this in a bit, but let's just do some more circle mapping. This is unlikely to map to these. These are the ones that map like this. All these cells over here are isolated within this group, so we get that shape. It's the only galaxy possible. This is group C. This is the only remaining gray cell that's in the center of a white cell, so this is the other group C, and everything we see in this cell we can just map the mirror over here. This will have to connect like so. These can't go anywhere. This cell can't belong to this, it can't belong to this. It has to come from this shape. And we see something like that cell not being usable, which gives us this cornering. Put this corner in. Now we have to take these edge groups and see how they connect, and we'll start with this D. It really has to take a channel down here. It has to take at least this cell as well. If D mapped to this group, its center of symmetry would be, looks like here. That means that we'd be getting this path already in a mapped space, so the place it has to work is actually this other letter. Put that in the grid. That means this is E, this is E. Let's put a little of the shapes that we know are edges in. This has to be reached by something other than this D galaxy. Can't go there, so it's gonna here. These have to come in. This cell at least has to come from this group. These have to at least come over. Now we have a cell like this, which has to be taken. That gives this. We now finish this whole shape. So we just mark that in. And there we are, we finished this puzzle. This is actually probably easier than the last one, and it was meant to be an introduction to the double spiral galaxies form, but if you follow these techniques of just trying to map these spaces and still coming back to these cases where we identify cells that are very hard to reach, hopefully you'll be able to make your way through the whole week. And when the Art of Puzzles 2 releases a section, you'll see a lot of clever uses of this style, 50 total puzzles, and hopefully these tips will get you through most of them. So we'll see you again soon.